Imagine waking up one day to find a letter from your HOA banning your dog. What would you do? Leave a comment below telling us where you're from, because we're curious to see just how far Oscar the ostrich's story has spread across the country. Let's dive in. I still remember that fateful day when I opened the letter from the HOA. My heart sank as I read the words. Your dog is a nuisance. My golden retriever, Max, who could easily charm the grumpiest of neighbors, was now banned. Couldn't believe it. How could they justify this? He had never caused any trouble, just wagged his tail and brought joy. This was more than just a pet being taken away. Felt like an attack on my home. I needed to find a way to fight back, to show them they couldn't control my life or my love for Max. As I brainstormed ideas, a wild thought crossed my mind. What if I got an unusual pet? They can't ban a parakeet, right? But then I thought bigger. What about an ostrich? The outrageous idea suddenly felt right. I imagined the HOA's reactions. Would they even know what to do with a giant bird? The thought of an ostrich galloping through my yard and scaring them made me smirk. Yet, I knew this one had to be planned perfectly, or Max's ban would feel like just the beginning of my troubles. With my resolve set, I began my incredible quest to find an ostrich. My fingers flew across Google, searching for nearby farms. Half of me was excited while the other was nervously skeptical. What if I couldn't handle a wild creature? As fate would have it, I found a farm just a couple of hours away. They had a young ostrich looking for a home. I called and sealed the deal, picturing the look on my neighbors' faces when they saw this huge bird. But what if the reality didn't meet my expectations? Doubt nagged at me as I drove. When I arrived at the farm, my heart raced at the sight of Oscar, my new pet. He was tall, feisty, and full of energy. I'd never owned an ostrich before, and the farmer's warnings echoed in my mind. They could be unpredictable. You'll need to train him, the farmer advised. My mind spun with possibilities. What if I failed? But Oscar was mine, and I was determined to make this work. I couldn't help but think about how I would show up the HOA. Who would ban an ostrich for being a nuisance? Back home, introducing Oscar to the neighborhood would be my next task. What would they think? I could already picture the curious glances from my neighbors. How would Oscar fit in with the dog-loving crowd? I took a deep breath and opened my front door to let Oscar roam in the yard. I felt butterflies in my stomach. The first person who saw him would either embrace it or scream in horror. Moments passed like hours, and then, just like I feared, my neighbor Mrs. Thompson peeked through her curtains. Her jaw dropped, and I held my breath. The reaction was intense. "What in the world?" Mrs. Thompson exclaimed, shouting to her husband and waving her hands. Oscar, in his inquisitiveness, began to chase after a rogue squirrel. That's when I realized I had to take control. Right then and there, I jumped into action, but Oscar was fast. As I ran after him, I couldn't help but laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. The thought of my sweet Max and his calm demeanor made me chuckle. This was entirely different. Would Oscar become too much chaos for the HOA to handle? Just as I managed to rein in Oscar, I lay panting on the ground. The commotion must have drawn other neighbors closer to see what was happening. To my surprise, they were laughing. "Did you just get an ostrich?" one of them shouted. "This is going to be epic." Some seemed thrilled while others rolled their eyes. I knew the HOA wouldn't be amused and that my fight was just beginning. The stakes were rising, and I needed to devise a plan to prove that Oscar was not a nuisance but a champion in our community. I was riding the high of Oscar's popularity when I met a local farmer named Will. He was friendly and had raised ostriches for years. As he watched me struggle to keep Oscar in line, he raised an eyebrow. "You know, these birds can be unpredictable if you're not careful," he warned, brushing dirt off his overalls. I felt a pit form in my stomach. What if I wasn't equipped to handle Oscar? The last thing I wanted was for my dream pet to turn into a disaster. I realized I had to take training seriously to prevent any mishaps. I spent the next few weeks under Will's guidance, learning the ins and outs of proper ostrich care. With each training session, I saw Oscar becoming more responsive and manageable. But there was a nagging doubt in my mind. Would this be enough? One afternoon, as I practiced commands, Oscar suddenly took off running after a neighborhood kid on a skateboard. My heart nearly stopped. I sprinted after him, calling his name, panic rising. I couldn't let this become another HOA headline. I needed to regain control before things spiraled out of hand. After the skateboard incident, I decided to double down on training. Oscar seemed to thrive on the challenges. One sunny Saturday, I invited friends over for a training session and had them help with socialization exercises. They laughed while Oscar pecked curiously at their shoes, but my anxiety returned when I realized he was accidentally knocking over potted plants. I worried this would make the HOA's complaints spiral again. Would I ever prove that Oscar could be a valuable member of the community? Or was my dream destined to become a series of unfortunate events? Days turned into weeks, and Oscar continued to impress us all. He even learned to respond to a few basic commands after hours of practice. My friends began to see him as the goofy and lovable creature I had envisioned. But just as I started to feel optimistic, I received another letter from the HOA. This one was worse, accusing me of disturbing the peace. My heart raced. Curiosity started to wane among neighbors, and I was terrified that Oscar's antics might be viewed in a negative light. I was determined to prove that Oscar wasn't just a pet. He was a community hero waiting to shine. Desperate to turn things around, I organized a community carnival, inviting everyone to come see the Oscar experience. I pictured him as a charming entertainer, dazzling the crowd. My friends helped set up games while I decorated the yard with colorful banners. The day of the carnival arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. Would the neighbors embrace Oscar? I could see them slowly trickling in, each hesitant yet curious. The stakes felt enormous, as I knew the HOA would be watching closely. I took a deep breath, hoping Oscar could rise to the occasion. As the carnival kicked off, Oscar trotted around happily, completely oblivious to the pressure. My friends cheered him on, and many neighbors laughed as he waddled through the games, showing off his remarkable, if not goofy, personality. Just when I thought things couldn't get better, Oscar jumped into the kiddie pool we had set up for the event, splashing water everywhere. Laughter erupted from the crowd, and I felt my heart soar. For the first time, I believed that maybe Oscar could win the community's hearts and minds. But then, I noticed a group of HOA members standing at the edge of the crowd, their expressions unreadable. As the carnival continued, a heated conversation sparked outside my view. I approached the HOA representatives, buoyed by my growing confidence. "Can't you see he's a part of the community now?" I implored, gesturing toward Oscar, who was receiving a standing ovation. But they eyed me suspiciously, raising their eyebrows. "This isn't what we had in mind for neighborhood standards," the president said, arms crossed. My heart sank, realizing that winning them over wouldn't be easy. I needed a way to turn the tide before they wrote me off for good. Just then, Oscar startled everyone by chasing a frightened squirrel, darting across the yard. As he tore through the crowd, I felt the moment hang in the air. My heart raced, and I closed my eyes, dreading the impending uproar. Thankfully, neighbors erupted in laughter instead. "He's got spirit," someone called out, but the HOA was undeterred. They insisted their rules had to be kept intact. I realized then that I had to step up my game even more. If Oscar was going to stay, I needed to leverage his popularity and work harder than ever to amend the HOA's perception. Fueled by a mixture of pride and desperation, I decided to produce a short video celebrating Oscar, spotlighting his charm and the joy he brought to everyone around him. I could leverage social media to show the neighborhood how much he meant to us. As I recorded clips of Oscar playing with kids and greeting friends, I felt my resolve strengthening. Perhaps I could change the narrative and show the HOA that Oscar was worth keeping. I uploaded the video that night and watched as excitement generated online. Could this strategy finally shift the power back into my hands? The next day, my phone was buzzing constantly with notifications and comments. People in the community were rallying behind Oscar and praising his heartwarming presence. I felt an exhilarating rush, but the HOA was surely growing more irate with each passing minute. I needed to present this newfound support to them soon. I crafted a new agenda for the upcoming HOA meeting, my heart racing at the thought of facing them once again. The stakes had never felt higher. I had to show them how Oscar was not just a pet, but a beloved part of our neighborhood. The HOA meeting felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension. I glanced at my supportive friends in the audience, drawing strength from their encouraging smiles. Oscar has brought our community together. I began, my voice steady. However, the board members remained unmoved. We need order, the president scoffed. A pang of desperation surged within me. This wasn't just about Oscar anymore. It was about our right to embrace uniqueness. But order can exist alongside joy, I countered, igniting nods from the audience. I knew this was a pivotal moment, and I needed to keep pushing for Oscar and for all of us. As I presented Oscar's story, illustrating the fun and laughter he created, I could feel a shift in the room. Neighbors chimed in, sharing their own experiences. But just when I thought the tide was turning, the HOA president slammed his hand on the table. "This is not a circus, and your emotional appeals won't work here," he yelled. My heart raced, but deep down I felt determined. I had one last card to play that could change everything. Oscar's unique contribution to our community had to be highlighted more than ever. I decided to organize a community celebration at the park, showcasing Oscar's charm and giving everyone a chance to see the positive impact he had firsthand. "This is our chance to show the HOA what they're missing," I told my friends. "If we can draw a big crowd and have fun, they'll see." With just days left to prepare, we set out to create an unforgettable event that blended fun, laughter, and community spirit. Excitement buzzed among everyone, but uncertainty lurked just beneath the surface. What if the HOA tried to shut it down again? On the day of the event, the park was alive with festivities. Neighbors mingled, kids chased each other, and Oscar was the star of the show, parading around in a colorful costume. However, I spotted familiar HOA faces lurking at the edge, arms crossed, analyzing the scene with disdain. My heart pounded as I felt their judgment piercing through the joyous atmosphere. Would they move to break it up? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that the community was finally on my side. I had to keep this momentum flowing and prove that Oscar was more than just a pet. He was a symbol of our neighborhood's unity. As the festivities unfolded, Oscar performed tricks that amazed both kids and adults. Laughter echoed through the park, and I felt the spirit of the community unite behind him. But then, disaster struck. Oscar got a little too enthusiastic and knocked over the snack table, sending popcorn and candy flying everywhere. The crowd gasped, and panic set in. I ran over, my heart racing as I frantically calmed Oscar, trying to prevent the chaos from spiraling out of control. Was this going to jeopardize everything we had worked for? I could hear the snickers from the HOA members behind me. This couldn't be how it ended. As I gathered my composure, laughter erupted from the crowd instead of outrage. Neighbors began to join in, throwing popcorn and snatching up candy, turning the mishap into a spontaneous food fight. I couldn't believe my eyes. Surrounded by laughter, I saw the HOA members exchange bewildered glances. In that moment, I realized that Oscar truly brought joy like no other. The mishap had turned into a celebration. As the event reached its peak, I felt a shift within me. Maybe this would convince the HOA that Oscar's chaos was a beautiful part of our community fabric. Just as I thought we'd captured the HOA's attention, one of the members approached me, looking stern. "This isn't how we envisioned the neighborhood," he declared, arms crossed. My heart sank. That old fear crept back in. "We need order," he insisted. With every fiber of my being, I stood my ground. "But why can't we have fun while still respecting each other?" Oscar symbolizes our willingness to embrace diversity. I could see that I was getting through to some in the crowd, their heads nodding in agreement. This moment could pivot our battle against the HOA, and my heart raced as I pressed on. The aftermath of the event left me riding a wave of hope. Social media erupted with photos of Oscar and the joyful chaos, and support flooded in from neighbors. I decided it was time to hold another meeting with the HOA, armed with the newfound community backing. This isn't just about Oscar, I told my friends. It's about what he represents for all of us. On the day of the meeting, I felt that same familiar rush, this time laced with determination. I had gathered testimonials from everyone who had witnessed Oscar's charm. Hopefully, I could prove that embracing our quirks didn't have to mean losing our sense of community. As the new HOA meeting commenced, I stood before the board, flanked by supportive neighbors. Oscar isn't just a pet. He embodies who we are. We crave community and happiness. As I presented quotes and images from the carnival, the crowd erupted in applause. I could see the HOA members' faces softening slightly. But just when I felt hopeful, the president leaned forward with a challenging frown. This is still an ostrich in a neighborhood. Can we really accept this? My heart dropped, yet I sensed a glimmer of opportunity to showcase the unity we all shared around Oscar. Fueled by passion, I delivered the closing argument of my life. Oscar represents love, acceptance, and fun. We're here to build a community that thrives on joy, where differences are celebrated, not ignored. The room was electric as neighbors cheered in response. And then, silence fell when I saw the president whispering to other board members. My heart raced as they exchanged glances. Were they ready to listen? As I awaited their decision, every eye was on me. What would the HOA ultimately choose? Would they embrace Oscar and our spirit? Or would everything I fought for come crashing down? As the final votes were cast and the room held its breath, I couldn't help but wonder, would our community embrace the chaos that Oscar brought, or would conformity win? One thing was clear. The fight for joy and acceptance had only just begun. What would you do for the things you love?